gotta get out of here. I can't live here. This is not going to be safe for me, right? And if this is not going to be safe for me, then I can't stay here. Does the landlord understand? Does the building owner or building management understand? What are you talking about? But there was no sexual assault. Did you get sexually assaulted here? No, I didn't get sexually assaulted here. Well, what are you talking about? Why do you have to leave? Why do you need to be transferred? But guess what's going to happen if we transfer you over to our property that is 2 miles away? The first time that maintenance person comes in with the bleach, what's going to happen? Going to be triggered all over again. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. See, this is what, isn't this good? I love this. I love to learn. And I love the idea that you all are learning because I promise you, by the time we get through this whole summer series, we're going to be so much better at advocating for victims and survivors. And you're going to be able to take the information you're learning and spread it throughout your agency so that other people who are doing similar work or who are doing the work, working with victims and survivors, will have this knowledge. And we're going to make sure people are not getting evicted. We're going to make sure that people can get an emergency transfer when they need one. And we're going to make sure that people who are housing specialists or landlords or property owners or developers or management in buildings understand what it looks like for a victim or survivor who needs their support. Does that make sense? Are y'all sick of me already? I know. All right, just hang in there with me. Okay. 2013, the reauthorization. That's one that most of us, if you were in this, have been in this work for any length of time, you might remember this one. I very much remember this. LGBTQ plus protections are added to VAWA. Tribal jurisdiction improvements added to VAWA. Campus sexual assault provisions are added to VAWA. See how with each stage of the reauthorization, we have more knowledge, we have more understanding, we better understand the needs, and those things are getting added on. 2022, how many people, well, y'all didn't know much about VAWA, so you might not know this either. The reauthorization expanded, come on you all, this is exciting, to culturally specific services. Woo! In 2022, we finally got it and said, okay, we need to consider culturally specific services, right? We have to consider that. And we have to consider why that looks different than everything else that is being done. We increased prevention efforts. Housing and firearm protections became part of VAWA. And enhanced trauma-informed response. Why is that more important than trauma? I want to separate the difference between a being trauma informed and a trauma informed response. Somebody help me understand the difference. What's the difference? Oh, y'all know this. How many social workers on screen? I know Dr. Davenport. Anyone else a social worker? Oh, okay. Latasha's a social worker too. Tell me the difference between trauma-informed and trauma-informed responses. Anybody?
Well, let's see, because your response is going to be comprehensive enough to with your resources that aren't a cookie cutter approach to what's happening. So you're able to address a matter from an informed way regarding the help seeking behaviors of the cultural person who's asking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? That's really important. And it really is not a trick question, but I just want us to understand that it's one thing to be trauma informed. It's a totally another thing to have a trauma informed response.
Mhm.
Because if I don't take that information and apply it to the way that I respond, then guess what? The person who's experienced the trauma still isn't getting the best services possible. When I'm traveling the country and people tell me we're doing trauma informed work, then we try to break it down further. And I say, well, tell me about trauma. What do you understand about it? You know, how does it impact the brain? How does it impact decision making? How does it impact what we call triggers? Where does that come from? What is the brain processing that make the triggers happen? When I ask all those questions and people can't answer them, then it tells me that trauma informed is language. It's lingo. It has nothing to do with actually how you do the work. But if I
Mhm.
don't understand that, I can't be trauma responsive. Trauma responsive implies that the responses that I'm giving this person are based on the fact that trauma that is present, and then I'm detailing or making specific my responses to accommodate that information. Latasha.
I was about to say, because sometimes in agencies that is true, as of they are taught only one way, but it's not a one size fit all scenario.
Come on here. Come on here. That is
Right,
correct. That
right.
is correct.
I was thinking like a cookie cutter approach. And then when you respond like that, it makes your resources re-victimizing for the person who are receiving. You're re-victimizing them with your responses if they're not trauma-informed responses.
That is so, 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 so good. That is so, so good. Yep, that's it. That is it right there. That is it. That's exactly where we're going with this. And y'all make my heart so happy because the more you share, the more everyone gets to learn, right? This is a learning community. I'm not a lecturer. That's what I do with my students. I'm not lecturing you all. We're here to kind of learn from each other. And you'll know, I know what I know based on the work that I'm doing here, but you all know what you're doing in your specific communities. You know better than I know what's happening where you are. So don't be shy. Jump right in and share whatever you want to. Okay, so let's talk about VAWA rights for survivors, the core rights under VAWA. Now, I'm interested to know what, if any of this, you all already know. I don't want to be repetitious, but if you don't know, then I'm happy to be sharing the information. Survivors have a right to housing protection. What does that mean? They cannot legally be denied housing, evicted, terminated from assistance, penalized for abuse committed against them. This applies to many federally subsidized housing programs. All of those things are their rights. That includes anything where federal dollars are being given out. When a landlord makes a decision to accept federal funding of any kind, and it doesn't, it's not limited to the one thing most people know, which is Section 8, right? Most places in the country I go and I ask people to tell me about what they know about HUD. That's what they tell me. Well, I know about Section 8. And I said, well, what about the other 20 programs that HUD offers? Oh, there are more programs? Oh, yeah, there are. Did you know you could be a homeowner? That you don't have to rent or lease, you could be a homeowner, that there are tax credit programs, there are all kinds of programs, and they're looking at me like, what in the world is she talking about, right? We know about Section 8, we know about subsidized housing, but there are many other options, and we'll get to those. There are many, many other options. But when a landlord or a developer makes a decision to accept any federal dollar, so much of their space has to be, and we'll talk more about this in detail later, has to be allocated for people who need housing subsidies. Under those um, those rules, they cannot deny a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence housing. They can't evict them based on any of the four crimes. They cannot terminate them from assistance, and they cannot be penalized for the abuse that is committed against them. A victim who is being abused in their home cannot be penalized because they're the victim. That is re-victimizing the victim, and it is not allowed with federal dollars. They have a right to confidentiality, and here is where a lot of housing programs fail. Programs must protect survivor identity, their address, their documentation, and their service records. Confidentiality is a safety issue, not simply paperwork compliance. This is where, when I'm sitting with housing providers, I have to make them to understand that even something as simple as service records cannot be disclosed. It cannot be disclosed that you changed the locks 3 times in 2 years. It cannot be disclosed that you put a light in the hallway just over their door. It cannot be disclosed that they now have a chain on the door. You cannot disclose any of that information. Maintenance cannot disclose any of that information. And that implies that not only does the housing provider need to be educated, but everybody who works for the housing provider also needs to be educated, because what good is it for me to tell the landlord, and then the person that comes in that does the actual maintenance work goes out and tells everybody? Would it surprise you at all that I would tell you that I did a training for maintenance workers? New England Maintenance Workers has their own conference every year, an annual conference that brings thousands of maintenance workers and developers and landlords and property managers from all over all 5 states. into one place for training. And while I was there, one maintenance person told me in the middle of my training, when we boom, 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 boom on the door because we're coming in to provide a service, and the person answers the door, what the F do you want and why are you banging on my door? Those people mean, they have bad attitudes, they're always mad at us. So now this was his response. So now rather than going one at a time, we go in pairs of two. Now, after I dropped the mic on the floor, I said, oh, let me see if I understand this. So if I'm already traumatized, here you come, boom, 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 on the door like you the police. And now, because I take offense to that approach, rather than coming as one person, you come as two people. So now as a victim, I'm supposed to let two men in my space. Talk about ineffective. But this is what it looks like. And is she really angry? Is she really mad? Do we think that that's his or her normal personality, that they answer the door, what the F do you want? Like, I'm thinking no, probably not. Is it a trauma response? And that's where it matters that we, as the service providers, are not just trauma informed. Clearly, they were not trauma informed. That's why they thought the banging on the door was a thing. Why can't we just knock the door? What's the boom, boom, boom? What is that? What is that all about? And when I asked them that question, they said, oh, well, you got to make sure people hear you. I said, no. That is an assertion of authority that you think you have because you work here. But let's be clear, you just working here. You don't own this. Now everybody's offended. Well, so are they when you're banging on their door. You're a maintenance worker. You work here. Yeah. So not trauma informed and certainly not trauma responsive. Okay. Right to emergency transfers. If safety is threatened, survivors may request emergency transfers to another unit or a safer housing location. Somebody tell me what an emergency transfer is.
Something that happens right then. They need it like right now. No more, I wouldn't even say a day, but right now I need to be moved.
Mm-hmm. That is correct. And who qualifies for that emergency transfer?
Survivors.
Survivors.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what survivors? Name some things specifically. What would it look like?
You can go.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say maybe someone that their abuser may have found where they live.
That's good. That's good, Natasha. That's good. Yes, it is. That's so good. Anybody else? Give me another example. What's another example? Why would somebody be qualified for an emergency transfer? The abuser found out where they live. Another example.
Also, the scenario you gave about what's happening even with the bleach. Even with, that they're triggered, the whole environment is triggering because of the way they clean the place. There are different reasons because of the way people traffic in and out that do a lot of different things, but mostly because of the way the building is ran and the way things are done that's triggering for the person. Like we were talking about, even a cleaning inspections sometimes that have to be done, I would think, the way they're done, triggering the person, because housing places have inspections, and then what they're made to do, what they're made to show, what I'm saying, how they're made to respond in those spaces for inspections could be a problem.
Excellent. Yep. All of that. And including, as we said, somebody who is a victim of sexual assault, even if the sexual assault happened in their workplace, right? Even if it happened in their workplace, and now they have to come home to their existing place where they no longer feel safe, right? Where there is some memory or trigger or connection between home and work. Who gets to decide whether or not it's an emergency transfer?
The survivor.
Yeah, the experiencer, the survivor, the victim, they get to make the decision, right? Right. That's it. That's exactly it. And as long as it relates to their housing safety, then they should be accommodated. And so we'll talk more about what the process looks like in a minute. They have a right to what's called self-certification. What's self-certification? Y'all got this.
Meaning deciding what's safe for them
Thank you.
in
Absolutely.
the transfer.
Absolutely. Do they need a police report?
No,
Come on, you all. Do they need criminal conviction of the person who harmed them?
no,
Mr. Kenneth, you are correct. They do not. Do they need court documentation?
no.
No, they do not. Self-certification means exactly what it says. You self-certify that you need an emergency transfer, period. I'm hoping y'all are taking some notes, and I'm hoping, are we recording? We're recording, yes?
Yes.
Because y'all need to make sure that everybody who works with you knows all of this information, because way too many victim survivors experiences are getting evicted or being harassed by landlords. I could tell you some stories of things I've heard around the country. Well, okay, I'll move you, but what are you going to do for me? You wouldn't believe the things I've heard people tell me have been said to them, all because somebody didn't know that VAWA existed and that they could invoke their VAWA rights. All right, VAWA allows self-certification in most situations. This is critically important because many survivors never call the police. All survivors fear retaliation. Most survivors distrust systems. Some face immigration fears, or they fear child welfare involvement, right? That's just real. They have a right to non-discrimination. Survivors cannot be discriminated against because of gender, because of sexual orientation, because of gender identity, or survivor status. They cannot be discriminated against. Okay. How many survivors lose housing not because they violate rules, but because someone abused them? How many do you think on average? What do you think the average percentage of survivors who lose their housing, not because they violated any of the rules, but because somebody abused them?
Maybe 80%.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe 80, 85%.
Yeah, it's close to that. It's about 73%.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, is that crazy? Is that shocking to you all?
Mm.
It's shocking in one aspect, but it's not surprising in the other.
Exactly.
Because unfortunately, it happens. There was a young lady at our institution that was dealing with this same issue, and we were doing what we can to try to provide her with help. But one of the things we ran into was she had to move because her landlord, even though she was the one who was getting abused, he was attributing everything to her. And she had kids, and it was just a dire situation. But it that let me know that this probably happens a lot. Probably does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. How y'all doing? You good?
We got
Yeah, that was good what he was saying. I was thinking that isn't it amazing that victims get blamed for the treatment that they're getting from systems and from their partners and for living arrangements and things they have to compromise to be safe. They're blamed for all of that.
Yeah. Isn't that sad? But
Hmm.
it's absolutely true.
Mhm.
And it speaks to why so many people don't disclose. It speaks to why so many people live with the abuse that they receive, either meaning they stay in that situation, or if they do make a decision to leave the situation, they never go and seek services, right? Because the likelihood that they're going to be blamed, even by virtue of some of the questions that they're asked, um, it makes sense. It makes sense as to why people don't disclose. Okay, let's talk about why housing matters. And then I want to talk to you about housing safety, and I want to hear your thoughts about what that looks like. Housing is often the deciding factor between returning to abuse and remaining safe, right? That is sometimes the deciding factor that people are making. Survivors frequently stay because they can't afford to leave. Y'all know this better than me. shelters are full, they fear homelessness, they have children, and their abuser controls finances.
Yeah.
How often do we hear all of those things, right? All of those things. We hear all of those things all the time. But then there are some common system failures. The systems that we have in place, as much as we'd like to think they work, they don't always work, and they don't always work well. And that is why, as advocates, Dr. Davenport, we learn to be as creative as we are, right? Bending the rules without breaking them, making decisions, looking for those funds that allow us to support people in sort of what we would call unconventional ways, because we recognize that there's no, as Dr. Spite said earlier, there's no cookie cutter approach. Every single case has to be considered as its own identity, as its own experience for that experiencer, because it is, right? So let's talk about that. Survivors often are evicted for police calls, punished for disturbances, forced to provide impossible documentation. They're denied transfers, re-traumatized during intakes, and treated as offenders instead of victims. How many people have seen that in systems when they're working with survivors? All of that. Sometimes what people tell me they've been asked is appalling. Sometimes when people tell me have the things that have been said to them, it's appalling. But I'm telling you, you do like what I'm doing right now and go across the country and sit state by state and have conversations with people, and the things people tell you that they've experienced would be mind-blowing. Trauma-informed response. A trauma-informed approach asks not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, right? Because when we give somebody 20 documents to fill out, and then we say you need baby's birth certificate, you need everybody's social security card, you need most recent bank statements, you need, the registration for the car, I need the children's immunization shots, I need this, I need that, I need the other thing. And then that person gets up and leaves the room, never to be seen again, right? And we wonder why they don't come back. Because what's happening to the brain as it's trying to process all of that information? Dr. Spivey.
They're being re-traumatized, and half of those documents they don't have because the abuser may have control of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. You're trying to pull all this information together, and the brain has a wonderful way of protecting itself. It really does. It really does. You all, those of you that know anything about trauma, and again, we're going to talk more about this as we get into the actual summer months, but the brain will shut itself down. And that's not something that the victim has control over, or the experience. They don't have control over that because they have experienced trauma. The brain, in order to protect itself, says what? I'm tired. Poof. I'm shutting down. This is too much for me. It's not lazy. It's not indifference. It's not I don't care. It's not I don't really want help. It's not I want somebody else to do it for me. It is that my brain doesn't have the capacity to take on any more information than it's already processed. And the minute you start giving me multiple tasks to do in order to protect me, my brain says, I've had enough of this. I'm tired. And go ahead, Mama. Go ahead.
You know what, Reverend Jackson, and to many systems, that looks like being uncooperative. You're being uncooperative, because you're having a trauma response to something that's not spoken to you in a cultural way where you can respond to that. And it looks like you're not answering the questions, or you can't answer the questions, or you're trying to be evasive, and it's trauma.
That's right. And that's where, yes. Oh, that's so good. And that's where we go back to what we said earlier, Latasha, when we were talking about being trauma informed. Because if I'm trauma informed, then I don't call that lazy. I don't call that indifference. I don't call that uncooperative. I don't call that being the difficult client. I don't call that. I call that being traumatized. And then if I'm giving a trauma-informed response, right? That's the difference. I'm informed by the trauma. Now I'm responding according to the trauma. That's why they're two separate things. So now guess what I'm doing differently? I'm not giving you a list of 20 tasks to do at a time. We're not doing that because we already know that's going to be ineffective. I'm going to ask you what you can do. What documentation do you have available? How can I support you in gathering information? How can I support you? Oh, you can get copies of the children's birth certificates, Mama. Don't worry if you don't have those already in hand. We can get copies of those. Don't worry about that. Do you have your ID? If you don't, let's get you some. Let's get you an ID first. Let's get that taken care of. I understand the importance of breaking things off in increments and compartmentalizing things so that the brain that already is overwhelmed, overstimulated, I have the opportunity to give you things in smaller pieces where it's more digestible. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's the difference between being trauma informed and trauma responsive. Because cognitive overload is a real thing. How many people have ever heard of
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
Cognitive overload, that's real. That happens to you and me. When
Mhm.
we got the 99 deadlines and the grants due on Tuesday and the OVW reporting is due on Thursday and I got to train on Wednesday and I got to be on a plane on Friday because I got to be at the CSSP Institute. Oh, and by the way, I got to preach on Sunday and cognitive overload. And what starts happening to the brain during cognitive overload? What happens?
You start developing like brain fogs and can't
Woo!
think
Who said that?
correctly.
Oh, Latasha, you better come on here.
Right,
All
right,
y'all that been
right.
blaming that on menopause and premenopause and perimenopause and that. No. Oh, yeah, because I get that menopause brain. No, the devil's a
Right.
liar.
Right. Get your black girl vitamins.
Okay.
Let me telling you.
Okay. It is cognitive overload. What else? What else besides brain fog? Let me tell you.
And overthinking, you start overthinking, overanalyzing, because you like you said, you have when you constantly have so much to do, you like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, and you start piling on, and and that just contributes to the stress that you already have. So, but just
And it also, she's right, it affects your patience, it affects your behavior.
Y'all gonna make me get up out my seat and start shouting.
Yeah.
You better come on here with all of
I
that.
also wanted to add the things that you're doing is also not the best. So you're just finishing and doing it any kind of way. Just trying to get through it.
There you go.
Yes,
There you
yes.
go.
Yeah, you're not giving the best of yourself. How many of
Mhm.
y'all on here? I'm gonna exclude Kenneth from the question. How many of y'all on here have been taught as women that you are supposed to be able to multitask well? Of course you are. That's your assignment as a woman. You're supposed to be able to multitask well. You got the baby here nursing while you're putting the clothes in the laundry, while you're washing the dishes with one hand, frying the chicken over here, and then mama's calling. Hey, mama, yeah, no, we become like these master multitaskers. Let me tell you how bad that is for your brain. It is so bad for your brain. Your brain, that it leads to things like early dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking and we're being taught that to be able to do multiple things keeps you sharp and on your toes, and you're able to know it has the opposite effect on your brain. It actually diminishes brain capacity. Put something down and focus on one thing at a time.
And don't feel guilty about not being able to juggle 50 million things. Like, what's wrong with you? You can't walk and chew bubble gum because you're not doing 7 things at one time. When that other culture just shows up as they are, and whatever they do is fine.
Right.
But for us, in our cultural dynamics, we're looked at as skewed some kind of way emotionally or intellectually if we can't do 10 things at one time. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
No, we're
And
not.
the guilt that goes along with that, like you're not productive enough.
Yes.
And like Miss Birdling was saying, you're not productive if if you can't. She said a couple of things a minute ago about your behavior or whatever. You shouldn't have to do all that at one time. It's not, it's not necessary, really.
No. Nope. 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 It's not. It's not. And when we teach, when we expect that of ourselves, unfortunately, we then place those same expectations on other people, even the people we serve. Well, why can't it happen to me too? I was a victim myself. You see what I did now? I'm running this place. Good for you. That is wonderful. not necessarily the path of somebody else's life. Dilworth,
Right.
you have a question?
I'm sorry, I had a comment. When you were talking about the multitasking and everything, what I was thinking about too is that with I know even with the older generation that multitasking once you've done it so long until it's expected, and you can't just do one thing at a time. So if you can't, if you're not, so by us, just like we're understanding that multitasking, doing one thing at a time, two things at the max, but some people telling them not to just do one thing, that's a challenge. So to them, it's like I got to do something else. I got to do something else, and I got to do something else. And I guess with them, it's okay because that's their challenge. At that, it's something you just have to work out. But it's not, maybe see why it take, you got to keep doing something else. So you got to, there might be, I wouldn't say it's trauma. I would say something you mastered. It's like, how did you master all of that? Even though I'm doing 5 things, you're doing 10, you're doing 20, it's like, are you able to do this like this? And like what you said, it's not healthy. At some point, it's gonna come and it's gonna catch up with you. And if you see some of the people who have done that for years and years, the ending is challenging. I just put that health. We can just tell in some of what I'm beginning to learn from the younger. When I say young, I'm not even talking about the youngest generation, but I'm just talking about the people that's 10 years younger than me and whatever. They're not heavy. It's like, oh, you got to really explain yourself. You got to know what it is you want. It's more detailed. And it's like, nope, if you want to say no, you say it and stick to it. But it's challenging for someone that don't know how to do that. So I was just saying that sometimes it's all a learning process. Unlearned. We got to learn to unlearn a lot of things and
Oh, that's so
learn
good.
other
That's
things.
so good.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Which is
So
why
good.
we spend so much time in this work. I don't think we spend enough time, but there seems to be an emphasis on teaching us how to care for ourselves. And that's so incredibly important because, again, the same standards we have for ourselves are generally the same standards we place on other people. If we have a propensity to overdo and to do multiple things, and for many people in this work, you come to this work from your own experiences, either in domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, whatever it is. And so sometimes there is a lean toward expecting people to have had the same outcomes as you, and that's just not realistic, and it should not be the expectation. And the one thing we we don't really do well is teach people how to separate their own lived experience from the work that they're going to experience working with experiencers. We don't really do a good job at teaching people how to separate those things and how to focus on that person as an individual and not as a part of a larger entity.
Well, as an educator, we are very well for our department. I know we stay on them about bias because those are major biases because we all have baggage, whether we realize it or not. But people think they're perfect, they have all the answers, they have all the solutions, but it's not true.
No.
Biases, we all have them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Huge
Wow.
lot of work to be done on implicit bias because to the point we all come with them. And how do we help people move past them?
Reverend Tracy, I wanted to say, I'm not cutting you off.
No, you're good. Go, girl. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just listening to the conversation. I'm just thinking about us as or just Blacks, just our race, our culture. For many years, we have had to multitask. We have had to go beyond what a lot of other races have had to do. And I think at this time, because we just grew up, you have to dot every I, you have to cross every T, you have to excel if you want to be able to be successful and then our work is scrutinized a lot more than a lot of people. And so, but now, we are looking at everything. And so, now we're having to go back to me. It's like we having to go back now and say, okay, well, was that right at that particular time? Because we have really had to work really, really hard to get to where we are. And so now we're at a space now we're saying, okay, now it doesn't take all of that, you're doing too much, and things. So, so I'm just looking at, so we are, as Dilworth said, we are unlearning things that we've learned. But at the same time, there's a lot of expectation that's put on us as African Americans, as Black, like we have to do all of this in order to be successful or to excel or to get the funding. We have to really make sure that our grants are worded properly. We have to do that work. So it's a change. It really is a change to kind of regroup and try to figure all of this out. Like, how are we going to do this, but still make sure that we are at a certain standard, because we know that our work is going to be looked at a lot different than other races' work is looked at.
You better say that again and again. Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why the more we know, the better, right? Because I will tell you again, as I'm doing this work across the country and I'm going to other places, I'm amazed what other people know in other parts of the country, what resources they're able to utilize, how they are able to work with survivors differently, and how survivors are able to thrive as a result of the education of the people who serve them. Our lack of education really puts our communities and the people we serve at a deficit, right? Because we keep arguing that we have limited resources. No, we have limited knowledge. The resources are unlimited. The knowledge is what's limited, and the absence of knowledge is the thing that keeps us repeating the same cycles over and over again. Well, we try to help as many people as we can each year, and we just do the best we can, and we could do more if we knew more. We could do more if we knew how to make our resources work for us rather than against us. We would do more if we shared information and we didn't gatekeep, right? And that's why things like this, what Dr. Davenport does, is so incredibly important, because it brings the information in, right? So that we can do better and serve better and have more to offer. So trauma, and y'all know this already, impacts memory, emotional regulation, communication, decision-making, trust, and safety planning. Many survivors appear non-compliant when they're actually surviving their trauma. And that emotional regulation is such an important part of the conversation, because it comes up a lot in my work across the country. We spend a lot of time talking about emotional regulation and what that means, especially when you're training law enforcement or legal services department. Dr. Spite and I experienced this when we were in doing neighborhood legal services of Detroit. When we were there working with them, we heard a lot about emotional regulation, or the lack thereof, with some of the people that they were serving. It's that thigh slapping when the judge is talking, or eye rolling, or then you have to keep saying, so you need to be quiet, like the judge is talking. It's that is, that inability to self-regulate is a big part of what trauma looks like. But if I'm the judge and I don't know anything about trauma, I don't know anything about being trauma informed or trauma responsive, I'm looking at that behavior and thinking to myself that this person is just as aggressive as the person they're trying to get the restraining order for, right? I'm looking like that if I'm a lawyer and I don't know anything about trauma response or trauma informed work, and I'm thinking this client is what? Difficult. No, they're not. They are a victim of trauma, and trauma affects one's ability to self-regulate. So does ADHD, right? So does attention deficit. So does attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There are a whole list of things. But how many people have that you've served, or I've served, over the course of our careers, in addition to being victims of trauma, may have some forms of mental illness as well? And how many people fully understand that many forms of mental illness can be the result of trauma that is unhealed. Now that's a whole nother workshop for which we ain't gonna be able to do that in 2 hours. We're gonna need about a whole day for that. That is real. That ADHD can be born out of trauma that is unhealed. And so when you look at the bigger picture, it serves us well to know and to be able to educate, and not just us, but our community partners, because again, there is that coordinated community response. If I might be trauma informed over here at SAS, this is Against Abuse Society, or at our house, but if I have to send you to my community partner, Mississippi Neighborhood Legal Services, because now what you need is out of my wheelhouse, what happens then? And those people are trauma informed over there. Now I have to turn you over to them, and now they're taking you before the judge, not me. And so when you're thigh slapping and eye rolling and stomping feet and sucking your teeth and all, now where are we? All the work I've done with you for the last 2 weeks is unraveling at the seams. Because we don't all share the same knowledge. We don't all share the same wisdom. We don't all have the same experience with that victim or survivor. Does that make sense? VAWA and victims of color. Let's talk about that. Why does it matter? Why are we singling them out? Because victims of color experience higher barriers to safety, greater housing instability. How many people know that domestic violence is the #1 cause of homelessness for women of color? Systemic racism is greater, cultural stigma greater, economic inequities greater, criminalization instead of protection greater. That's why VAWA matters for us. That's why it's worth a whole workshop to have the conversation, because if you don't understand that, then guess what? Everybody in your community has less of an opportunity to thrive at the end of their experience because we lack the knowledge. Black survivors may fear police violence, that their children will be removed. Mass incarceration impacts their lives greater. Being disbelieved is more likely, and community silence around abuse is more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Black women are often labeled strong. Dr. Spike talks about this so good all the time. Aggressive, difficult. These stereotypes reduce empathy, but they also reduce protections. Latina survivors may experience language barriers, immigration fears, fear of deportation, isolation, financial dependence. Indigenous survivors, jurisdictional gaps, geographic isolation, historic violence, missing and murdered Indigenous women in crisis, Asian survivors, cultural shame, family pressures to stay, silence around abuse, fear of dishonoring their families. Imagine, in addition to all the other things you're experiencing, you carry the weight of dishonoring your entire family. To know that not just will the abuser abandon you, but your whole family may abandon you if you decide to seek services. So culturally specific services matter. One-size-fits-all advocacy does not work. Dr. Spike said this at the opening. Cookie cutter approaches, they fail us. Effective advocacy, and if you're note-taking, I want you to write this down. Effective advocacy includes representation, language access, cultural humility, community partnerships, so key, faith-sensitive approaches, and then historical awareness. I cannot talk about effective advocacy if I don't have those things in place. 6 things, but key for me to say I'm doing effective advocacy in my community. Impossible without representation. Impossible without language access. And language access is not limited to, well, I'm in a Spanish-speaking community, so I have to have someone on staff who speaks Spanish. Or I'm in, a Haitian community, so I need somebody who speaks Haitian, French, Creole, or French. Or in some cases, if you're Haitian, you might also speak Spanish. It doesn't, no, that's not what we're talking about. Language is not limited to that, to to a specific language or dialect. It's also important to speak the language of that community. What am I saying? How does the community communicate? You got to know that. You can't be in community sounding like somebody from outside the community. If the community communicates through flyers, for instance, and in many communities that's true, and I can tell you in Boston, Massachusetts, that is the language in the inner city of Boston. If you're going to put out information about anything, the way in which you're going to do it is you're going to put out a flyer, right? So if I'm hosting an event, if I'm having a Sagittarius party, I'm going to put out a flyer. If I'm running for congressional office, I'm going to put a flyer on somebody's windshield saying, vote for Sally Jones. If I am opening a new business, I'm going to put out a flyer. If I'm going into any West Indian restaurant in Boston and we have 100,000 of them, you're going to see a bunch of flyers on the counter when you're checking out for everything that's happening in community, because that's how the community advocates. That's how the community speaks. So when I was running my own domestic and sexual violence program here in the city of Boston, what do you think I created as a way of a brochure? The same kind of a postcard flyer, because that's what I mean when I say speak the language. It looks just like this. Can y'all see that?
Barely, but yeah.
Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how why would I put out some long brochure or some, multi pieces of paper if that's not what the community recognizes? But look at this. Let me show you how this works. It opens like this, and then it opens again like this. So it is all the information that the community needs, but it's all done in a nice, neat little postcard, because that's what y'all understand. And it's got a coating on it so that you could put a cup on top of it and it can get wet and it's not going to smear the information. That's what I mean when I say language access. It's not just enough to speak the language, but the communication style of the community is what you should be mimicking. Because if not, if I could spend a whole lifetime talking to you, but if I don't speak your language, how helpful would that be? If you're going to adopt a child from Guatemala and bring him to live with you, but you never learn to speak Spanish, well, then what? Right? Oh, I raised them their whole life, sent them to the best schools, sent them off to college and everything, never heard from them after they graduated. Why not? Well, you didn't know them. You didn't immerse yourself into their culture. You didn't make yourself a part of their life experience. So thank you for the nice place to live and the college education, but see you later. Right? That's what we do in community. We come in, we want to do the work, but we don't know how to speak the language. If this is the language of the community, if this is how the community communicates, mimic what they do. That's what language access really looks like. All right.
Reverend Jackson.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just a little side note. I was really inspired and really happy about the actress Angelina Jolie and her daughter that she adopted from the African country, just graduated from Spelman. She let her go to a Black school. She immersed her in a whole lot of African American education, and she kind of transitioned into that community with her so she can understand and learn. And she just graduated from Spelman.
That's beautiful. That's how it's done.
That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's amazing, right? That's exactly how it's done. And I remember seeing her taking her to college. And I was like so excited about that, because that's what I'm talking about. Now that child, long after she's graduated, get a career going on, this and the other thing, she's gonna hear from her again, right? Because you bothered to understand and envelop her world and be a part of it, and then be to the best of your ability. But that's what we have to do in community. And it's fair to say that you can work in a community and look like the community and not really be a part of the community. Does that make sense? Because I didn't grow up in Boston, but that's where my program was. That's where I serve. And I live in Boston now. I didn't live in Boston most of my career, but I still had to find my way in the community. And one of the ways in which I had to do that was to learn to speak the language. Does that make sense? Because if not, I just look like every other outsider. What's she doing here? Right? Okay.
Right.
This is so good, you all. How we doing for time, Dr. Davenport? Am I all right?
Yeah, you have a half an hour.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
So we have to do a part 2.
You know I talk too much. Okay. All right. Underutilization of VAWA. Why is VAWA underutilized? Why? Why do you think it is? Woo.
Lack of information.
Thank you, Dr. Spite. Lack of awareness. Never heard about VAWA. I'm telling you. I'm doing this work going across the country, and I promise you, tomorrow, Sunday night, I'm leaving for Utica, New York. I'm going to be in upstate New York, and then I'm going to work my way down to New Hampshire, to Vermont, and then back home to Boston. And I promise you, then I'm going to Virginia and West Virginia. And I promise you, in every state I'm in, when I start talking about VAWA at the table, people start looking at me like I'm speaking a different language. They do not know housing protections exist. And they believe abuse automatically disqualifies them. I want you to get that part. That victims and survivors, experiencers believe that abuse automatically disqualifies them for anything because that's what's being drilled in them. That's what's being told to them by abusers. That they are nothing, they deserve nothing, they're getting nothing, nobody's going to help them, nobody's going to hear them, nobody's going to believe them, right? So they don't even think that they deserve the help or that the help's available to them. After all, if I'm living in some place and somebody's abusing me and my neighbors are hearing screaming and hollering and boom, 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 boom against the wall and me hitting the floor, my kids screaming and blah, blah, blah. Why do I deserve help? Why do I deserve to get to move to a quiet place? I don't think I deserve any of those things, right? System gatekeeping. Want to talk a little bit about that. Some providers misinterpret the law. Some do. Add unnecessary requirements, right? Going around to housing authorities, teaching them about VAWA. The housing authorities don't know, the staff at housing authorities don't know about VAWA. And even if they have a passing knowledge, they don't have a full understanding. They don't know how to interpret the VAWA rights. And therefore, they are just as guilty of dismissing someone's VAWA rights as any other housing provider because they lack knowledge. And they're asking for documentation that they don't even need. Well, did you call the police? Because if you don't call the police, if I don't have a police report, if I don't this, if I don't that, when we already said 20 minutes ago that someone can self-disclose. They can self-certify. We already said that. But now they're being told, because they don't know any better, they don't know, you've got to call the police. Well, you got to divorce him then, because if not, there's nothing we can do for you. You got to put him out, get him off the lease, right? That's what they're hearing. They demand police reports and fail to explain what VAWA rights are. They fail to explain it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of packaging, the kind of information you can actually have in your programs that you can share with people who come to see you, that give them this information before they leave you, so that by the time they sit with somebody in housing, they come armed with knowledge. They come armed with an understanding of their VAWA rights. You can do a one-pager that explains VAWA rights that you can have on site in your programming that you can give somebody when you give them your brochure. If you're in the process of redoing your brochure, you can have one little line that talks about simply what VAWA rights are. Just imagine that, just one little short paragraph, that's all. So that somebody walks away armed with knowledge. Okay. The other reason they're not using it is because in historically marginalized communities, there's distrust. Distrust of police, court, child welfare, housing authorities. That distrust is rooted in real experiences. People are not making up their distrust of those systems. They're not. Those are the real lived experiences that they have had. And sometimes their distrust is even of us in our programs, even though we look like them, right? We're serving in communities where some of us live and, or at least familiar or, have some relative proximity, and still there's distrust there. Many materials are only in English. Have you bothered to have your information translated into other languages in your community? Some materials use legal language. Can you put it in common language, in simplistic language? When you write about VAWA in your new program, in your new brochures, when you recreate them, or you do that one pager, can you do it in language that's simplistic enough for anybody to understand without talking about section 74, chapter 3, verse 2, and the person's like, well, where am I supposed to find all that? inaccessible to survivors with disabilities. And that we see so much of. That information is up here somewhere. And if I'm a survivor with a disability, I can't see up there, I can't reach up there. It's in the housing authority, but it's on the top of the wall when you come in. It's in the management office, but it's up here somewhere. Or it's in our offices and it's not accessible to people. And then there's fear. Survivors fear retaliation, deportation, losing their children, homelessness, and then financial collapse. Those things are real. Those things are real. Can survivors truly access rights they were never informed they had? That's a question. Can survivors truly access rights that they were never informed that they had?
Well, how are they going to invoke their rights if they don't know about them?
Come on now. If nobody ever told you that you could get up out of that chair and go to the kitchen and help yourself to lunch, you brand new at the job. And so you sit there and starve all day because nobody's allowed to leave the building. The phone's got to be covered. But nobody told you there was peanut butter crackers and coffee in the kitchen. So all day you sit there hungry. And when you think of that in the most simplistic parts of our own lives, think about it if you are bringing multiple layers of trauma to your experience and you need this job. And you can't afford to be wrong here. You can't afford to do there can be no missteps, no hiccups, because you need this job and you need it to survive and to take care of your children. And so, no, I'm not going to get up from the desk and let, the phone ring and I miss a call that's important to my boss because I'll just be hungry. Nobody told me I could go right to the kitchen and get something. Or nobody told me I could ask Sally to step in for 2 seconds while I go and get myself something. It's as simple as it possibly can be, and yet it happens every single day. And not just in our communities, but across the country. It happens every single day. Okay, so let's talk about solutions and action steps. What providers can do. Let's talk about that because it's really, really important that we understand that there are some things we can do to make it easier. We can simplify forms, and we talk about this all the time. I think Dr. Davenport and I have talked about it to the point of nauseam. I know Dr. Spite and I have too, till we were sick of ourselves. Can you show me your forms you use? I'll show you my forms I use. Can we make things as simple as possible, right? Fewer words, more infographic, right? What does that mean? When I say infographic, what does that mean? Just think about the word infographic. What does that mean?
More to the point.
Yeah, more physical pictures than words, right?
Yes.
Because everybody isn't as well versed in reading and understanding and reading with comprehension as you'd like to think they are. So all of the movement, all of the systems, all of the federal systems, everybody is coming into this understanding that when we talk about victims and survivors of DV and SA and all the 4 crimes, what we're learning, what we're understanding better is that people who've experienced enormous amounts of trauma, who are sitting at the intersection of complex and acute trauma and functional trauma, may be more responsive to graphics than information. And so infographics implies that the information is there, but there are some graphics to make it easier. There's some pop-out boxes, there's some pictures, the point where it says, address, there's a little house. Does that make sense? Infographics makes understanding easier for somebody who may not be able to understand a whole lot of questions. Especially not because they couldn't under normal circumstances, but because I'm escaping violence, because I'm in the middle of a crisis, because my emotions are already on overload, and because my adrenaline is still rushing from the accounts of the last day or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. Now when I'm taking in information, less is more. Does that make sense? So explain rights clearly. That's what I said when I said that one pager, that one postcard, that one little thing you clip on to information that you give somebody that says VAWA rights made simple, and then simply explains what VAWA rights are. It could be this big. It doesn't have to be that deep or serious. Just this.
You have a sample, Tracy?
No, but I'd be happy to work with you on it.
All righty then.
You know, I love a project. Yeah, I love that. I think we could create something that we could be used universally. Imagine how awesome that would be, right? We come up with something that we create. I don't do direct service work anymore. I'm on the other side of this doing this now, which, but I love the idea because it's necessary. But I could get some language, Dr. Davenport. I'm excited even just to talk about that. So yeah, let's you and I work on that. And then offer language access, right? Offer language access. It goes back to what we said earlier. Is in the community you're serving, what is the cultural demographics around you? Who lives there? Who lives there? Is there a Somalian community there? Is there a Latina community there? Is there an African community there? Because if there is, even if it's a small pocket, language access is really, really important. Doesn't mean you got to go out and hire somebody who speaks 6 languages. Absolutely not. You don't have to do that. But I think in most federal grants, and Dr. Davenport will have to tell me if this is still true, you can write in for language accessibility, right?
Oh, yeah.
For interpretation as well. You can or cannot?
You can.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's a requirement now.
Oh, well, praise the Lord. See what I'm saying? I was making that up. Amen. I was making that up. That's good to know. So there you go. That matters. You should know who's in the community that you're working in. Okay. And then use survivor-centered language. What does that mean? What is the use of survivor-centered language? Anybody?
Is victim-centered language? You mean,
Yeah.
It's just that survivor-centered language, actually putting them first and making it victim-centered around their needs and their language, their culture, whatever, individualized culture, and just centered around who they are as a survivor and how you need to respond to them and talk their language. I'm not saying that, you go all the way, urban or not that all the way, but you understand and respond to them in a way that's relevant to the way they communicate and what they need and where they are and their help-seeking behaviors, how they talk, what they need.
That's so good, Dr. Spite, right? Survivor-centered language is just what Dr. Spite said. It's communication that prioritizes their dignity, their autonomy, their safety, their lived experience, right? Especially in domestic violence, sexual assault, the 4 crimes, right? There's no blaming, there's no judgment, there's no sensationalism, right? Or minimizing, right? It recognizes that survivors are the experts in their own experiences. That is it, right? It honors choice and autonomy, right? Above all else. So we avoid language that takes power away from them, right? Instead of, why didn't you leave? Or the person refused my help, we say things like, they made the safest decision they could at the time. See how that sounds so different? Well, she refused my help, or he refused my help. No, they made the safest decision they could at the time. She chose not to access services right now, right? That's different. The survivor knows their situation best. That all sounds and looks and even feels different, right? Well, she just didn't want our help. Yeah, well, no, let's not say that, because it may not be true. And here's why it matters. Leaving can increase danger. Survivor-centered language recognizes coercion, fear, finance, immigration concerns, children, culture, faith, safety planning. It takes all that into consideration. It takes all that into account. It removes victim blaming, right? Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm thinking also all those things are so important for survivors to understand that you're comprehending their dilemmas and their barriers when you're talking to them. They need that. And when they say things like, well, they were upset that I didn't leave, it's important for you to tell a survivor, you're not breaking the law by staying. He's breaking the law by hitting you.
That's the whole truth. That's
you have to communicate in a way that does not absolve the batterer and the dilemma and the things that that's been put upon them, as they are surviving. because they are surviving every day. They're surviving because they're the expert in their own relationship. They're the
Amen.
expert in the batter's responses,
Amen.
not you.
That's
And
it.
so since they're the expert, they're actually in more control than you think they are in saving their own lives. So telling them to leave, they know when to leave and when they have the resources to leave, whether it's cultural resources. And when I say cultural resources, I mean, like you were saying earlier, there are certain families that you embarrass, and especially in the church. You know what I'm saying? You go in the church and start talking, that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother story.
Absolutely.
Well,
So
in
yeah, you're
social,
right.
within social work, we call that meeting a person where they are.
Mhm.
That's right. There it is.
That's the bottom line. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I heard someone say it a little differently recently. They said it's meeting people where they're going, because people are journeying to healing. It's not a destination, right? It's a journey,
Right.
it's a process,
Mhm.
one that most
Mhm.
people will live out for the entirety of their lives, right?
Mhm.
You'll always be fighting the demons of what was said to you, what was done to you. You'll always be trying to move past that. There'll always be things, even in the most healed person, that look familiar based on experiences we've had in the past. And we'll have to choose not to see it as what it was, but to see it as what it is in the moment. That's a process. That's a lifelong journey. And so it's an intentionality, right? To meet people where they're going, where they're journeying to, that, it's a forward motion, understanding that even in forward motion, sometimes we might take a step back. Right. Sometimes, and people do. And I love what you said, Dr. Spide, earlier about, victims and survivors sometimes thinking we're mad at them. They're worried about what your thoughts are about their choices, or whether to stay or to go, or whether to divorce or to stay married, or whether or not to, to leave their current situation, or to remain there, or to move to shelter. They're worried about what the abuser's thinking, but they're also worried about what you're thinking. You don't spend all this time with me. It's like when you go to a department store. You ever go to a department store? They, you in Louis Vuitton, they spend 30 minutes showing you a bag. You done tried it on your arm, put it on your shoulder, modeled it. Oh yeah, put all your stuff in it to make sure it can hold weight, this, that, and the other thing. But in your mind, you're not sure whether or not you want to buy the bag. But there's a little bit of you that thinks you need to because they've invested some time in you. If you feel that way, what does the survivor feel? And then you have to talk yourself out of the need to make a $2,000 decision based on the fact that the salesperson's feelings might be hurt. Like, girl, what?
And that goes for a lot of different things, don't
You
it?
see what I'm saying? It
Even going to
happens,
buy a
though.
car. You go to buy a car in the car, that the pressure to buy even a used car, and they just spend all the time letting you drive it and all this other stuff for you. Yeah.
Listen, you done had the sunroof open, put your sunglasses on, put some music on, test out the sound system, and then you pull back up to the dealership and you feel automatically obligated to go in and talk to the finance manager. You're not even sure you want that car. But you have to talk yourself out of those feelings and say, no, I'm gonna test drive 2 or 3 more. I'm not even sure this is my car of choice. I might need to think about this. But if we feel that way, right? If we feel it, what do you think they feel when they spend 30 minutes talking to you? And then you present all the options, and you know what? Because I'm going over here to get Miss Epps to talk to you about going to the shelter, and you're like, and now they're thinking, oh, I'm not even sure I want to go to the shelter.
Right. Like, you ready to leave now? You see, I didn't told you what you can do. You ready to go now? Okay, yeah. Look, you can go
Absolutely.
now. Because then I just tell you what can happen for you. Isn't this wonderful? You ready to go now? We got a place for you. Yeah, are you supposed to say, oh yeah, let me go get my kids and all this and all that and go and leave my network and try to figure and
we do it. It absolutely is real. It's funny because we know it's a reality, and the person is sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I want to do any of these things. So that is really important. That is why language matters, right? Victim-centered language matters. The person who caused harm, is the one who's responsible. As Dr. Spite always says, the offender chooses the violence, and no one deserves abuse or assault. Nobody does, right? We want to make sure our words are empowering. Victims may be accurate in legal settings, but survivors often reflect resilience in healing. They reflect that. You want to tap into that part of somebody, right? Where is the resilience in this person? Where is the healing in this person? Who have they relied on in past situations that were difficult for strength and wisdom? That's where things like faith come in. right? And so it's important. Language is so important. Amen. And then you want to build trust. Believe them the first time, not after they spent 30 minutes trying to convince you. And understand, in their convincing you of what happened, they are minimizing their language and they are sanitizing their experience. They're cleaning it up and making it right like nice for you. Because the first time you look surprised by something they say, they already know you can't handle any more than that. And so now they are minimizing language, sanitizing language, minimizing the experience, making it a nice, neat package so they can make you feel safe.
Like you used to say, Reverend Jackson, you could say, now you got 2 people in trauma. Sitting there, what? Remember how you used to say that? They're telling you some things and you're going, what? You know, not two people sitting there need some help.
That's the whole truth. Avoid the victim blaming, maintain the confidentiality, and then respect their autonomy. They are the experts. And we say it all the time, but sometimes we don't really believe it our own selves. They are the experts. Amen. We respect their autonomy. And then we increase outreach, because this is the other thing that I'm doing. And Dr. Spite and I are working on a project together in Detroit. And this is a huge thing for me. She knows already. Increase outreach. How does the community know you're there? How do people know? How do people know that you're there? How do they know you're there, Kayla? How do they know? Ms. Epps, how do people get to your work? How do they know you exist? How do they know about the services you provide? How do people know that?
They won't know because I'm not present in the community.
Come on now. How are people supposed to know? How do they know? Where do people gather in your community? Where are the gathering places? You should know that. What'd you say, honey? I'm sorry, Ms. Epps.
Town areas.
Say that one more time. You're going in and out for me.
Well, in my community, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In my community, a lot of things happens in the town area near the city hall, in another building, because we have a small town, and you won't know anything if you don't get out to network, collaborate with other, gain those community partnerships, just show your face. You're not going to get anywhere. Your information, your business, or anything won't get put out there in the public if you don't show up. You're not going to gain anything as far as information or just getting that community knowledge, which you send at home. It's not going to come to you. You have to go to it.
Reverend Jackson, she taught SAS some years ago when she came to Detroit, and she said, and we thought we were doing pretty good, but we didn't realize until Reverend Jackson came to Detroit and talked about community saturation. And she said, well, what's up the street? What's around? This is a city. So we got a bus, one of our church buses, and got on that bus and rode all through the town, through the proprietary businesses all up and down the cities, and went in all those businesses and asked if we could leave some flyers. And we left flyers and talked to women and all those businesses all up and down the city were a lot of Black-owned businesses, and a lot of them didn't even know that we existed. And we do a lot of work with the police department, social workers, churches, and a lot of them didn't know. And it was not one business we went in for those 2 hours that we're saturating the community with our brochures that somebody wasn't running out the door behind us. This happened to me. This happened to my daughter. I didn't know where. Each one we went to, it prolonged the whole day. We were only supposed to be gone for 2 hours. It prolonged us into hours because of people chasing behind the bus and chasing behind us as we walked. And community saturation is another really good way to talk to people and even advocate for people and counsel people for so many seconds right there and tell them, this is what we're doing. Come, we want to talk to you. It was just amazing how she trained our whole staff on those type of things a few years back.
It's amazing. I thank you for sharing that, Dr. Spidey. That was a day. I just got to tell that story to somebody recently, actually. But that's such an important thing. It's, we do outreach. Tell me what that looks like. Because when I ask the question to people, what does it look like? Well, tell me what it looks like. You've got someone going to an occasional event here or there, or somebody, doing an occasional posting someplace else. But when you really, really, really want to get to the core of the community, you got to do just what Dr. Spidey I said we did. We got to saturate the community. We got to go in and out of the businesses. Where do the people gather? If you know what, if women of color at the hair salon, let's get to the hair salons. If they go into the beauty supply stores to buy hair products and buy hair and buy whatever else they're buying, we need to be in those places. You know what? If there are churches, multiple churches in the community, we need to be connecting with those churches and creating relationships. That means somebody got to go to stuff that's happening at the churches. If the first lady's hosting a brunch on Tuesday or a Saturday event for women, somebody on the team need to be showing up at that thing and making an introduction. If something's happening in Mississippi Valley State down campus, they're having a community day, they're having a new student orientation, or whatever it is, somebody needs to be present there. We need to be saturating our communities, because we know of our people, they are far less likely to get up and go someplace for services. They're more likely going to accept services if you bring the services to them, right? COVID didn't teach us nothing else, it taught us that there was way more domestic violence and sexual assault going on in our communities than we ever thought. And the way in which we learned of it was when COVID happened and we all got flooded with all kind of resources. I had money I couldn't give. I was direct service ED at the time. I had money I couldn't give away fast enough. From the timeline, the city would say, we'll give you this, spend that by this day, because on this day, we're going to give you this. And so we were, listen, and then we realized so much more was going on in community than we ever thought it was, because now all of a sudden we're out in the community taking the services right to the people. It is out there. It is happening. Outreach is more than just the person who's the outreach worker who goes to an occasional event, right? It's got to be so much more than that. Is there a Black or Latino or whatever the culture is? Is there a radio station in the community? Can you get a spot on there? Can you get an opportunity to talk on there? One of the things that happened to me very early on with my project, when I founded my project here in Boston, was that the Black radio station here did a thing monthly where they honored a Black woman in the city of Boston as one of Boston's leading ladies. And that happened for me when my project was brand new. I was honored as a Boston leading lady. And when that happened, immediately I was able to go on air and talk about my project. It was a huge game changer, because I was able to make a public declaration that there is a project in Boston specific, culturally specific, for women of color. We're here. If you need us, this is where you can find us. Huge, huge. I went to the Black Ministerial Alliance, one of the first public meetings I ever did when I founded my program. I went to the Black Ministerial Alliance. I got on their agenda. Took them months to give me an opportunity, but I got on their agenda. And when I did, I made a huge declaration about my work. And those pastors ate it up. They were following me out the door to the parking lot, because I was able to speak their language, right? And so I'm saying outreach is not enough to just say we hired an outreach worker. Everybody's outreach, the whole team, everybody who works there is outreach.
Yeah, well, we're at the point of wrapping up now. I know we're going to have a part 2. I did want to add on to what you was talking about outreach and hitting all those places. You can't just say you're hitting them and it's going to be okay. You got to repeat that pattern over and over, because people get amnesia about whether or not you still exist. And they like to say, well, I thought you all had closed. And so you have to continue. You may have went to all of the emergency rooms and all of that in 2009. Well, in 2010, you need to go back, because they got all new hire. So this is something that's ongoing and not something that's experimental and trial-based. But I did want to say, for those of you all who are social workers, make sure you sign in and sign out. Put that information on there. When you do exit from here, it's going to take you to an evaluation form. Please complete the evaluation form, and then it's going to take you to a general certificate. Your social work certificate, you will get that directly from Mississippi Valley State University Social Work Department, but you'll get it within the next 3 weeks or so, because I have to process the paperwork at our house first and then submit it, and then they will process it and mail it out to those who are social workers. So I am excited about this, and I'm excited that when Tracy and I talked about it, we already knew it was going to be a part 2, part 3, because of the continuation and need. And I think one of the things we may want to definitely make sure is once she gives me this PowerPoint, because I can't submit my hours without it, and the objectives and the different things, maybe we can start working on doing a draft of the VAWA brochure that she was talking about as it relates to our local services. And also maybe Tracy, if you could send me or run a copy of the brochure you showed us as a sample. I know it wasn't about VAWA, but it will have the concept of the direction that we're looking at for the design.
Absolutely.
So I am so excited, and I'm so glad that our partners from Valley State was able to join us this time, because most of the time when it's during the school year, it's really difficult for them to get the opportunity to join us online. So today I was really excited to see so many, and I'm hoping that next month we'll get another chance to have them come on for your part 2, and then also for our part 3 of activities and skills for sexual assault support groups. That's going to be on that Thursday of that same week. So you want to do a closing wrap up, Tracy?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am super excited, as Dr. Davenport said, for I'm not sure I want to call it part 2. It's more than that. I feel like we have so much more information that we want to share, but I'm also really excited about the idea of doing the VAWA snapshot. I like that language. A VAWA snapshot that everybody will be able to utilize. I think if we can create something, whether it's a fact sheet, whether it is, something coded like this that people can hold on to, but just some kind of communication so that folks will know, excuse me, that VAWA exists, that VAWA rights are rights that every survivor is entitled to, and then exactly what that is. I know that Dr. Davenport and I talked a little bit in detail about what we wanted the summer to look like. So part of what will be coming is more conversation about what are all the programs that are federally funded, so that what victims and survivors are entitled to more than Section 8. But I don't feel like people mostly know about other things that are available. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a homework assignment. If you would tap into what's available in your state, I'll come back with the federal information. If you would tap into what's available in your particular state for housing services or housing support, that would be incredibly helpful. Sometimes you don't really know until you have to look for it, right? When I'm talking to social workers or student attorneys here in Boston, or when I'm lecturing in other schools across the country, when I say to folks, can you tap into what's available? People always come back and they're surprised at what's available in their own state. There are state resources as well as federal. So I'll talk to you about more of the federal programs that exist under HUD. I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about some of those and share that information with you. But I also will look for you to tell me about some of the programs that are available in your own state. I bet there are things you don't know of and things that you're not tapped into. Some people know about continuums of care, and they know about multi-housing and other things, or PIHs or whatever. But there's more to housing availability than Section 8 and public housing. There's more to that. There are other programs. There are other programs, and people can be homeowners. They can own their own homes, and we can help them get there. We can help them get there. So I love this, Dr. Davenport. Thank you for always giving me space to be creative in my work and bring information that I feel like we as advocates in this work don't get enough of. We don't get enough of this information, but the people who suffer as a result of that are the people that we serve. So thank you all for being so gracious with your time today and for sticking it out with me. I know it's a lot of information.
It was wonderful. Wonderful.
It's a lot of
wonderful.
But we're going to make use of it, and we're going to help people. We're going to really help people, and not just say it, but actually be able to do it. So thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to share anything before I dismiss us? I know I need my coworkers to get on our staff Zoom link once we hang up for a short meeting. But is there anyone else who would like to share something or maybe offer a suggestion for additional
Yes,
topics?
that's really good. Is there anything that you want to know that you want us to talk about? Because even though we have an outline for the summer, it is by no means etched in stone. And so if you feel like this brought up something for you that you'd like me to talk about.
Did have something. So I know we were talking about like, the rights and making everyone aware of the rights. But we were also mentioning the barriers that people get when they go source places. So it's like, okay, well, I know that I have the rights to this particular thing, but you're saying that I need these paper, this, and they're standing on that. They're standing on saying that this is what you need. So how can we enforce that the rights are being heard and taken care of? Because it's kind of my word against theirs if they're not enforcing it at their particular agency or wherever we're trying to get them to move or get them to relocate and things like that. So
That is an incredible question, Kayla. And you know what?
Mhm.
Then it becomes a legal matter, right? The short answer is it becomes a legal matter. That's when legal services has to be involved, and whether or not you have somebody who does legal services on staff at our house, or whether or not there is a legal entity that you're associated with that you would call for a legal question, that's when it becomes a problem. But here's what I'm going to tell you. This is the short answer, and we'll talk more about this. If you remind me in June when we come back, we'll talk more about this. The minute that landlord gets a letter from ABC legal person, right, at our house, let's say there's a legal person on staff that says that someone's attempting to invoke their VAWA rights under these circumstances and situations, and they attach the VAWA language, the actual legislation in that document, guess what's going to happen? At the fear of losing their federal funding, at the fear of losing their federal association, guess what they're going to do? They're going to comply with VAWA. What they're hoping for is that you don't understand that. What they're hoping for is that you don't know that. But as a landlord, if I refuse someone and I'm accepting federal dollars, guess what's going to happen to me? Oh, I won't be getting any more federal subsidies ever again, right? That's going to be a wrap, right? Those resources will be no longer available to me. I won't be able to take in Section 8 folks anymore. And most landlords, as you know, they want that. That's guaranteed money. Because even if I can't pay my 30%, they're still going to get 70% from HUD or from whomever the federal entity is. But the minute I don't comply with VAWA, that is reason for those resources to be removed. And so that is, most people are not going to try to run down that game, but they're counting on the fact that, to your point, you don't know it. I'm going to argue with you and tell you that I need a police reporter or this or that, because maybe somebody wants an emergency transfer or maybe somebody, whatever. But so yes, we'll talk more about that. That's a really, really good question. I will make a note to myself to talk to you more about that. But specifically, I'm going to pull up some information and some case studies from your state, because that's where it's relative, is where you are. So I will talk to you about that in June, but that's a really good point. And I actually had a little, I had some scenarios, some fake scenarios that we were going to run through anyway. So that actually is one of them, when somebody starts asking you for documentation that you're not required to give. And then who helps that person? And here's why I'm tapping on the screen like I'm touching you, Kayla. You can't even see my hand. My hand is on your shoulder. Because those of you that have been physically present with me know that's me. I'm like this all the time. But here's the thing that's so incredibly important, is that if you were to give the person that VAWA statement we're talking about, that VAWA snapshot, on it, it would talk about what documentation is required. You see what I'm saying? And so that person would then be able to say, you know what? No, that documented that's not required. I am self-certifying. They already know it. The landlord already knows it. What they're counting on is that you don't know it. Now you calling the police and putting yourself in further harm. Oh, she called the police on me? Oh yeah, now we got yet another victim of DV homicide. The devil's a liar. So yeah, no, we got this. We got this. I got you. We'll talk about it in June.
And I would probably add in some information about the Mississippi legislature in regards to this, because many people aren't aware of the fact this is also a breach of confidentiality for them to bring this out. And it's a requirement of the state, if you get state funding, that you must make this report on a state level. So if you're having a problem with the housing, not only do you send them a documentation and give them a letter, but you are CCing the Department of Public Safety, well, no, the Department of Health now, their legal department, to inform them that you have a conflict, because they're requiring you that if they do not adhere to this, this is not just the loss of funding for that particular landlord. It's also a violation of the federal funding for the state, the entire state, because we had to lobby to get these fundings across the board. And one of the requirement was that they adhere to all of our laws and rules. So that was something. Maybe what I'll do is get a copy of that and make sure I have that to kind of do a joint little statewide while you're doing the national on that, so that they could get a better understanding. And the number one thing to help someone when they get in conflict with the landlord is having an advocate. That's our important role, is to be there as an advocate, documenting everything that's been said. Landlords don't like to see someone else there documenting. They like to keep their information hidden and just directly to that resident. They may even cuss you out as the advocate, but the bottom line is you are now a witness, and you will be documenting, and you will be sending this along the upwards to a higher government. So that's also a lot that people don't understand, the requirement that we are, as agencies, are required to make reports on the state level because of violation of VAWA.
Amen.
So
I wanted to say too, no matter how much you know, Reverend Jackson is so organic in all the things that I'm always taking more notes, always get more knowledge, no matter how long I do this work. When she comes to the table to educate, it's just always amazing things that needed to be added to your toolbox about how comprehensive we do this work for our communities. And I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spite. And can you take a look at all of that same information for Detroit and share that with us when we come back together in June? That'd be
absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
So awesome. So I'll look at the federal picture, you look at Detroit, Dr. Davenport will look at Mississippi. And when we all come together, we'll be able to share across states, but also and take a look at the federal picture. But the more we know, the more we can offer people. And so I'm excited about being able to offer more. All right, you all, this has been amazing. So glad we had this time together. I feel like I'm going to sing the Lawrence Welk song. No, that's Carbonette. That's Carbonette. All the young people are like, who's Carbonette?
They don't know. They don't know what that is.
Okay. All right, then. We'll see you all next month.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Dilworth. Bye, Yvette.